Why did Mr. Paul Atanganji, the Minister of Territorial Administration, find himself in the far north region? According to some sources, Mr. Paul Atanganji went to quench the rising movement baptized 10 million the Northeast. Lawyers, on the other hand, have now gone 2 days into their sit-in strike called by the interim bar president and the Minister of Justice and Keeper of Seal, who was supposed to give them a response as to appease the sit-in strike, is instead mute, is quiet. And pundits are asking themselves, does it mean that the Bar Council is wrong to call this a sit-in crisis? Before we knew it, other lawyers very close to the regime decided to boycott this call for a sit-in, 4-day sit-in strike. It is a developing story and we'll definitely be getting to know what the outcome is. Despite the call of the CONAC chairman, Reverend Dieudonné Massy, that any material and financial support given to electorate would be tantamount to corruption, it has not stopped Mr. Paul Biya, through the Minister of Territorial Administration, to bring support funds to traditional rulers through the chief executive officers of region. He gave them the deadline up to December 3rd so that traditional rulers could enter in possession of this money. And pundits are asking themselves, what difference would it make in a region like Southwest where the CPDM is a lone contestant? Why should they come again and give them money, meanwhile they are already sure to win? Equally, we recently had the various ministry defense budget in the parliament, and it appears that some 10 top ministry have drawn the highest part of this budget, starting by the Ministry of Secondary Education, the Ministry of Public Works, the Ministry of Basic Education, and a lot whole. Then other ministries like the Ministry of Forestry, Ministry of Agriculture, where Cameroonians expect that priority should be a focus, have just find themselves with what can be considered average. And so these and many more will constitute the stakes of today's edition of Cross Views, where the confrontation of ideas sparks truth. And we are already joined by a crack team of young activists for some and political analysts for others, who will be dissecting things here. I'm Njomo Cyril. The program is brought to you by Nabila. Behind the camera is Oliver Fozo. The program is under the supervision of our station Buzz. We shall meet with our viewers, with our panelists, with our guests behind this jingle. Stay with us. Already seated in the studio is Mr. Ate Solomon. He is a publisher of The Voice. Bantu Voices is a digital media network that focuses on NGO, non-governmental association or organization activities. He has covered more than 25, or what am I saying, more than 250 community projects. And he is here today from the civil society to share his opinion on nation building. Good evening, Mr. Ate Solomon, and thanks for joining us for this other edition of Cross Views.
Good morning, Good evening, Mayor. And it's a privilege for me to be on this platform and to share my experience.
After you, Mr. Ate is Mr. Gabriel. He's from the he's a lecturer from Catholic University, but tonight he's acting as a political analyst. Good evening, Mr. Gabriel, and thanks for joining us once more.
Good evening, Mr. Cyril. It's always a pleasure to be on this table to share our views on pertinent issues concerning the nation.
First, the newspaper recently have been very, very fertile, talking about the fierce tussle over Southwest Regional Assembly presidency. the newspaper talks about FACO always positioning itself as the leader of all the other five division that make with FACO making it 6 that makes up the Southwest. And division like Lebialem, Coupe Maningumba came out, Meme equally came out decrying why is it that FACO is always a Mr. Grab all attitude. They need to step down of this attitude and allow other political elite of other regions to at least for one time lead issues in the Southwest. I'm with you, Mr. Ate. Want to find out how did you read across this information titled by the Guardian newspaper?
Come again.
I mean, the Guardian newspaper that titled Fierce Tussle over Southwest Regional Assembly Presidency. Who will be the president of the Southwest Regional House of Chiefs?
It's a normal thing within politicians, within political lines, especially when it's a new concept. People are anxious to be the first councillor, be the first this, and the battle is definitely going to be fierce. And
so we have not had this sound of contestation in other regions. Why the Southwest?
Well, the Southwest is a politically very active battleground, especially if you look at the case of Mayor Ekema and other elites of the CPDM. It has always been a contest, it's always been that fight between them, even within the same political party. So a lot of people would want to be at the forefront, leading action, even when we already know that the CPDM is alone in the regional elections in the Southwest, but it's still a very fierce battle because within the CPDM itself, there are fractions within the party, and those fractions will want to make their voices heard, and different people come with different ambitions, different people come with different visions, and there are people behind who are pushing for these visions to come to life. And so nobody will want to be left behind, especially when it's a new concept, especially when it's a new regional elections coming up. People are anxious to see the outcome of it, and obviously it's going to spark controversy and a lot of battles around.
The paper titled, Mr. Gabriel, that this attitude of FACO as a division within the Southwest PA is an outright greed. They have manifested this over so many issues, and at a time when they were expecting them to step down from their high horse, they want to maintain their position as a first division in the Southwest. Do you hold on to this opinion?
Well, it is very much going to be an interesting factor to understand how the CPDM political party functions. We are in a region which is faced with the crisis that we are having now, and it is a normal thing to insinuate that the head of states or those who are in charge of the CPDM political party would want people whom they can control, people whom they can trust. I don't think that the problem is not just about personal ego or differences between the political people themselves. I think it's coming from above. And coming from above, not in a direct way, but they have their support. Because sometimes you need to understand, one of the parties which have the word party discipline and party sanctions, we're talking about the CPDM political party. And so in a region like us, where we do not know the different agendas that people can have with respect to what is happening now, it is obvious that those from the high, from the high rooms, from the upper house or the central bureau, they may want a particular set of people whom they are used to, whom they are very certain about their modus operandi. That is what I can contribute about this particular house going in, for the regional house of chiefs.
So why always FACO to lead? Why should the president of the Southwest House of Chiefs come from FACO?
Well, it blends itself with what I just said.
Okay.
Yes, the president or which house is going to lead, it's when you look, if you've studied the way CPDM operates, if you look at the way CPDM operates, you will see that actually going in for elections is something that is already done internally. So we invest on a candidate, we design who is going to be where and everything. It comes from there. it's not as if it's so spectacular. So if this is a problem, it may seem to the eyes of the normal that it is just personal clashes, but this is a regulation within the party. I think that for those who are militants of the CPDM political party, they may understand better than we do. But this is from the internal regulations.
After you, Mr. Gabriel, Mr. Ate, are FACO chiefs special before their colleagues of the other divisions?
FACO chiefs in particular and Southwest chiefs in general happen to be very much involved in a lot of politics. But now let us come back to FACO in particular. FACO is very strategic in this, as far as the Southwest is concerned. First, FACO holds the capital of the Southwest region, and FACO is one of the richest divisions in the Southwest. So
not more than, yeah.
Yeah, I said one of. Yeah, I said one of. I didn't say the richest. I said one of. And when I talk about riches, it's not just in terms of natural resources. Because when people talk about riches, you talk on just look at natural resources. We're talking about in terms of the economic boom activities that are coming in. It's true, Indian is rich in natural.
Cuba was the first economy before the Anglophone Crisis.
Yeah, that's what I said. But for now, FACO happens to be the only breeding ground in the Southwest. If you look at the way the conflict in Northwest and Southwest region has paralyzed everything, FACO happens to be only the breeding space in the Southwest. And so just the fact that FACO is the only breeding space in the Southwest region, it creates a lot of battleground. People want to contest in order to hold position. And so it becomes very strategic and becomes a battleground for the ruling party itself, because people want to show to the hierarchy that they are the ones that are in control. They are the ones that are in control of the situation. Just the fact that it is stable, and then people they always want to call it the head of state, and they want to show to him that we're in control of the situation. I'm the person who is in control of the situation. Remember when Mayor Ekema was alive, he was the person who was in control of the situation in Boya. Everybody knew that. Everybody, including the hierarchy, knew that the Lord Mayor was in control of the situation, and you could see some political stability that was taking place in the region. Compared to what it is now, it's not really that kind of situation. So just like my brother here rightly said,
that's Mr. Gabriel.
Mr. Gabriel rightly said, the game is all about who is that person that can really represent our interests. And within the CPDM party, there are far-right CPDM members and there are far-left CPDM members who have different ideologies, different approaches towards arriving at the objectives of the CPDM. There are some people who have the hard approach and there are some people who have the soft approach. And so there's always that battleground between the people with the hard approach and the people with the soft approach. So it makes the battleground very, very tense when it comes to elections. People want to see that it is somebody from a fraction that wants to win, and then this person thinks that, no, it should be the person from a fraction that we want to win.
Mr. Gabriel, we understand that the president of the Southwest Chief Conference, Chief Longa, actually come from FACO, and so maybe since he is already heading, it could be respect to allow him maybe be part of those who select those who will man the office of the president of the regional house of chief. What do you make of this other way of seeing the argument why FACO will have let, or FACO is leading, is to lead the regional house of chief?
Well, if you look at the longevity of the chiefs in FACO, and you look at their political history, you look at maybe their political interference, both in the nation and in their political systems, you will understand maybe probably the choice that they have over them here with respect to the others. Another reason could be the superconvergence of chiefs into FACO, with respect to the insecurity that, if you notice, there's been some displacement of chiefs. Those in the Libya.
It's the same FACO that had some 7 of his chiefs captured sometime when Mayor Ekema, the late Mayor Ekema, came out and gave him sound warning that he wants his chief back. So how secure is FACO to be a breeding room now for migration of chiefs?
Well, it may not be 100% secure, but at least it is the best in terms of security for now in the North region. So that is what we're talking about. It may not, but when you look at the way it is heavily militarized, when you look at the accessibility of the fighters into the region with respect to, for example, Libya. For example, in Libya now, if you watch videos that come up and all the rest, you will notice that there are some parts we have the impression that military does not even go there. For example, one of the fighters crowning himself paramount chiefs and all the rest. So when we look at it, we are just saying that FACO has a very strong point. Has a very strong factor in who has to be the highest maybe ranking authority in terms of the regional house of Southwest chiefs and all those things. So we need one of the chiefs to be in a region which is very accessible. We need one of the chiefs to be in a region which, in quotes, has been put as the capital of the secessionist fight. You know, this is where they've always chosen to be the capital, Boya, which falls in Faku. That's what I'm talking about.
Last boss.
Yes, we equally need to be sure that this is us equally, like he said, right? The headquarters, the governor's office is here, most of the central offices are here. So if we were to look at a federal system of government, this was going to be the capital, the political capital of the state, if we were to look at it like that. So obviously, thinking about who is going to be regional house of chiefs, other than internal regulations that may come from the political party, FACO seems to have many much advantages than the others. So it can be a possible or a plausible assertion towards that.
We equally had some papers from the French newspaper that carry about the ineffectiveness of school shifts following COVID-19 response. You, Mr. Ate, you will have gone now into classroom or visited the university. Do you still have the impression that the two-shift system announced by the various ministry of education at the very beginning of this school year is effectively implemented some months after?
I have not been able to visit some schools, but I simply believe that it's difficult for us to implement that, because for us to implement that, we need actually some additional resources in order to do that. You need extra money to pay for teachers, you need extra money to do this and that. And so Cameroon's state of finance now doesn't permit that to happen
but
anytime
the Prime
soon.
Minister recently said we bounce back. We are projecting this year some 2.7% gross domestic
We're
product.
projecting, we are not yet there. So
We are 1.7.
Yeah,
which is better than the minus 1.1 that was estimated following the crisis.
You don't expect the Prime Minister to come out and tell you that the economy is suffering. The Prime Minister will never come out and tell you that. But that's the reality. The economy is suffering, So, and I don't blame them. You don't believe that, you don't want me to be in a system where I'm procrastinating negativity. I'm thinking that things are going to be worse. And I just need to come out and tell people that, no, things are fine, things will be fine. But in reality, things are... Look at our politicians. They live here, they go to Yaoundé and say the situation is under control. But is the situation under control? People might think that they are doing that for political reasons. But as a leader, even when you know that things are not good, you keep on saying that things are going to be fine.
At the time, we saw Senator Mbelamoki Charles raise voice at the upper house of the parliament, shouting that something must be done on the ongoing crisis in the northwest and the south.
Well,
were you not there to see that intervention?
Senator Mbelamoki Charles is one of those politicians that I consider as honest politicians. I'm talking about those politicians.
After you, Mr. Ate, Mr. Gabriel, what do you make of the newspaper that reported that up to 80 students in some examination classes, whereas all the COVID-19 measures as LSE prescribed by the government gone to now that people have gained back their normality? Meanwhile, the second wave of COVID-19 is back and is claiming life all over the world.
Up to 80% off?
80 students per class in examination classes.
Yes.
Yeah, in some examination classes. So the question I'm asking you, some measures were put like social distance, the wearing of face mask, and where has all those measures gone to?
When we look at the way laws have been passed and promulgated and their implementations in this nation, we shouldn't be surprised about how these things go about. There are laws whose level of, practicality, it's high, or implementation, and others which is just pure charade. So it depends now on the government. But when it comes to the implementation, there are some schools that are functioning properly. There are others which are not. But it also has to work with the allocation of budgets for those measures. Measures have their financial implications. So when you're talking about the hand sanitizers, the building of all those things, if you notice the way the government functioned, the government did not send a particular budget most of the time that this is budget strictly for COVID-19.
But the Minister of Secondary Education has one of the, it's among the 10 top best ministry in terms of budget allocation. And they say only 17, out of more than 317 billion budget allocation, they talk of 17% will be for operation and will be for investment, and the rest, so we are talking about some 83% will be for operation. Is this not enough, a chunk of money that can be put to contribution to respond effectively to the ill effects of COVID-19?
It's a nice story. Left to see whether the story comes into implementation. At some point, you need to know when politicians are playing or resorting to demagogy, and you need to know when whatever they're going to say is going to be practical. Notice this budget allocation, well, is it a coincidence or it is something, it's very, it's at the same period where regional elections is going to hold. So what kind of discussions are you supposed to be holding in front of the people? Discussions to increase their hopes, discussions to tell them that we can do better, discussions and all the rest. We are not being pessimistic, but we are just saying that the reallocation of the budget, that's one thing that has been done, which is good. Now, how is it going to be implemented? What ways will we ensure effective implementation of the budget, that it should do exactly what was found in the preambles of its objectives? That is what we are even having as contention, rather than the statement that was made about the percentage of the budget that is going to be allocated for that. So in my own opinion, the government should instead pass much more strict sanctions, maybe much more warnings or reprimands and ways or modes of operation.
But is the threat visible? Is there any need for urgency?
There is a need for urgency. In fact, since the comments of this crisis, this is not the only crisis that we are facing.
The COVID-19, are we really still at that level where there should be fear on the air?
In terms of whether they are going to implement it, or in terms of the effects that COVID-19 has on the people?
Yes, on Cameroonian, for example, are the effects really dreadful?
I don't think so. You just need to go into a bar and see the way and look at the proximity between one person and the next. You just need to go to meetings, you just go to the market and all the rest.
Our government will have favored that.
The question is, this same government banned bars, and at some point it was one of the first bans or embargoes that they put uplifted. So is it that we prefer drinking beer, or I don't know how to put it, we prefer alcohol more than, the way it sounds, it seems as if the government is, that statement sounds as if they are much more interested in making much more money also, because those are big businesses that generate a lot of income to the country per se. That's true. But that was one of them, one of the very first laws that was uplifted. So what we are encouraging or asking the government is not that they should not look at laws which are going to be of the interest of the population. What we are telling is that once you pass law, you study you do what they call the feasibility studies of the laws or the instructions that you pass. For example, when COVID-19 came, what happened? They passed laws concerning social distances in taxis or in cars. That
debate has evolved, Mr. Gabriel. We are talking about the second wave now. The question, and you have answered, Mr. Ati, I want to pose you the same question, whether there is actually a threat, as it was the case during the first wave of COVID-19.
I happen to be a student in the University of when I'm entering the university. there's somebody who is standing at the gate and he's checking, making sure that people wear face masks. But I can assure you that people come and stand in front of that man, they put their face mask on. As soon as they cross him, they remove, and he's seen how they're removing. And when we enter the campus, you look at the atmosphere, it looks like COVID-19 does not exist. And that is what has actually been in the minds of the people. And I think that when COVID-19 started, there was a comment I made about the way we communicated. I said the way we communicate COVID-19, it kills more than the COVID-19 itself. It makes people to live in fear. And people came to contract it out of that fear. And I said we need to communicate positivity. And when people started communicating positivity, it started reducing the rate at which people were psychologically affected. And that is what is happening in our communities today. People have overcome the fear of COVID-19. And when people have overcome that fear of COVID-19, the impact on them drastically reduces. And so basically now, I don't want to say that COVID-19 does not exist, but psychologically people have overcome COVID-19 and they've even come to accept that COVID-19 is something that can be treated. And so it's difficult for somebody now to live under the fear of COVID-19. It exists, but people are no longer afraid of COVID-19 like the way it came out at first.
It's the place to thank Monseigneur Cléda with his zeal essential at a time when he produced and saved Cameroonians from the dreadful ills of COVID-19. Other newspapers in the French region have equally talked lengthily about how Cameroon recently joined the international community to celebrate the 1st of December commemoration of the World Day for HIV/AIDS, and in Cameroon, the South region is topping the line with some 5.6%. And I want to ask you, Mr. Gabriel, what could have caused this region of the South with headquarters Ebolova to have this high level of contamination or sexual patients? Or should I say of patients as far as COVID-19, as far as HIV/AIDS is concerned?
Well, there are two hypotheses which could justify such a theory, such an argument. The very first one is the awareness of the people on such a virus. The awareness on how HIV virus comes about, its effects and its way of contamination. Notice that when you talk about the South, we're talking about regions which we hardly talk, that it takes, they don't really appear more often in the discussions of the country, not because they are left or sidelined, but because of their little impact in terms of political and economic aspects. So when you come now and you're talking about HIV and AIDS, and you see that they have a high level of contamination in such a place, the first hypothesis could be whether there's enough sensitizations. I don't think so, as per when you're comparing it with Boya or with Yaoundé and all the major cities. Another one could be the level of lecherousness of the people. Notice the level of promiscuity of the people. So with all this promiscuity, lack of awareness about measures of prevention, you see that we can account a little bit to some extent for the high the proliferation in the number of contaminations that exist in those regions.
After you, Mr. Gabriel, Mr. Ate Solomon, according to a vox pop that was rendered by a local media in Saint-Melema, it's been accounted that young people that leave the university milieu and come to the locality for job seeking and other holiday making actually are the one who import this illness from the city and unfortunately victimize the young girls of their community. Do you see into this? Do you see some element of truth into this argument?
Yeah, I think just like my brother said, the first hypothesis he brought up, which I want to key into that hypothesis, is that people are less sensitized about the effects of HIV. I think it sounds unfortunate. It sounds not very funny, that this is an age where almost everybody is aware about HIV and methods of prevention, but we are still looking at the community, or we still look at the whole region with all its political privileges that they are not aware of. I think just like he rightly said, this region may have had political privileges, but there are some social privileges that are not very much present in this region, because when you acquire some certain privileges, you may think that life is just that sweet, just life is just that relaxed, and then you don't make extra effort in order to get out of some certain situations. So I think that the South region that I know, that I once visited, he equally made mention of this issue of high rate of promiscuity that might be one of the causes. I don't want to dismiss that fact totally, based on side comments that are being made by people concerning that region. So I would not want to equally sideline that fact. But, one thing we equally have to take into consideration seriously is what the Vox Pops said about students who come from the university. And this is a region that doesn't have a university itself, and you can begin to understand the impact of university students returning from other regions on the population that is not that very much aware of what the university milieu is all about. So when somebody comes from the university and enters the community, that person sounds like an extraordinary person, and so whatever he says, that thing might sound as if this person is bringing a kind of divine message to the population, and so it's very difficult for them to resist that kind of situation. So that person is now seen as a kind of a divine person. That person is seen as a kind of elite person, because that person is coming from the university and looks extraordinary. So it takes the intervention of campaigns, civil society campaigns, and sensitization for them to be able to bring down some kind of assumptions from the minds of the population, and most especially letting them to understand that when somebody comes from the university, that person is not a god, that person is not kind of very influential person, that person is just a normal person like you, and so you shouldn't just give in yourself to that person without any actual form of protection.
After you, Mr. Ate, we now take on to our first topic. Ministers from various departments have now passed